This is a story from when I was a student at university. I was researching a project about historical houses in different regions. I was visiting a rural area to investigate a house I wanted to visit. The landlord agreed to let me interview him and have a look around the house. It was quite a distance away from where I live. So I decided to spend 2 days in the area to give myself enough time for everything. The house was deep in the mountains, an hour's bus ride from the nearest train station. When I arrived, I was pleasantly greeted by the landlord. He told me that the house was not originally his. He had bought it from the previous owner who had given it away. No one lived in it at the moment, but he tended the garden and cleaned the house once a month. The exterior of the house was old and damaged. Houses built in such a traditional way were hard to find. I was filled with anticipation. When he took me inside, I could see that the house was spacious and still had all the original furniture. I could almost picture the family still living there. The owner of the house went outside to tend to the garden and left me inside to have a look around. My goal for the first day was to figure out the layout of the house, so I set off to have a look at the rooms. The first room had a traditional Japanese floor with a sliding door. When I walked through the door, I found another traditionally designed room. I walked through another set of doors and found another much smaller door in what seemed to be the innermost room. I had never seen such a structure before in my research. Excitedly, I opened the door and found a small Japanese-styled room. In it was a small desk and a shelf, and on the shelf sat a Japanese doll. They aren't very common nowadays. The color on the doll had faded over time, but I was fascinated by its fine craftsmanship. I picked it up and examined it, amazed that they were capable of creating it at the time that it was made. It had dark and glossy eyes, tightly knit lips, and very carefully arranged hair. When I was ready to leave the room, I placed the doll back on the shelf. I figured that the original owner of the house had made this room for his little daughter. I sat down at a desk and drew out the floor plan I had compiled. When I was ready to leave, I found the landlord in the yard and told him that I would be back tomorrow. He gave me the key to the house and said that he wouldn't be able to make it tomorrow at the time I wanted to come. Luckily, he said he trusted me and permitted me to come back at whatever time I wanted. Early the next morning, I visited the house to continue my research. My goal for the second day was to examine the furnishings to try and find out more about the lifestyle of the time. I found that the kitchen shelves, bowls, chopsticks, and the kimono in the chest of drawers were still intact. They were very valuable materials and gave a great insight into what life was like at the time. One thing did stand out though. The state of the rooms gave me a very uneasy feeling. It almost felt like the residents had very abruptly left, maybe even disappeared. When I was done looking at the rooms and household items, I decided to go back to that small room at the far end of the house. Taking a look at the shelves, I found a small stack of Japanese parchment paper, a set of small brushes, and juggling balls. Once again I picked up the Japanese doll to examine it, pretty much convinced it must have been a little girl's room. The doll had a different feel to it than the day before. Some of its hair, which had been neatly trimmed, seemed to have fallen out. Looking at the back of the doll, I noticed that the hair that was left had also grown in length. I turned the doll around again to return it to the shelf and was met with an astonishing sight. The doll's mouth, which had been tightly closed, was now changing into a smirk. Arg! The surprise made me drop the doll. I picked it up and returned it to the shelf, but turned it slightly so that I didn't have to look at its face. I noticed that more hair had fallen out, and what hair remained, had grown even longer. The doll's head whipped around and tried to look at me, and I saw it was still smiling. No, no, no. I'm sorry I touched you. I turned my back to the doll and grabbed the door to leave the room.
Have you noticed?
A young girl's voice whispered in my ear. I was so in shock that I didn't know what to do. Terrified, I ran out of the house and went to look for the landlord. Oh, you finished your research? That was quick, he said. I was too scared to answer him. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you very much. As I was leaving, the landlord asked me, "Did you see it?" I didn't answer him, I didn't even turn around. All I could think about was getting as far away from this place as soon as possible. After my trip to that house, I quit my job as a historical house surveyor. To this day I sometimes catch myself thinking about that day, wondering who it was and who spoke to me.